A stark warning has echoed from the White House, setting a tense backdrop for a nation grappling with division. President Trump declared that a very big force awaits anyone considering new protests, a statement that has intensified an already volatile situation. He made it clear that any form of violent protest would be met with overwhelming force, a promise that has now been put to the test on the streets of Los Angeles. The president's words were not just rhetoric, they were a direct signal of a new federal strategy, one that would see the military play a direct role in domestic law enforcement, raising profound questions about the use of such power against American citizens. The catalyst for the unrest in Los Angeles was a series of aggressive immigration and customs enforcement raids. These operations swept through communities targeting undocumented immigrants and creating a palpable sense of fear. The raids didn't just affect families, they sent shockwaves through the local economy. Businesses that rely heavily on immigrant labor, especially in agriculture, food processing, and construction, were suddenly disrupted. The actions were seen by many not just as law enforcement but as a direct assault on the fabric of their communities, leading to widespread anger and a feeling that a line had been crossed, prompting people to take to the streets. What began as peaceful demonstrations quickly spiraled into chaos. Protesters initially gathered to voice their opposition to the immigration policies, holding signs and chanting slogans. However, the mood soured as frustration boiled over. Freeways were blocked, bringing the city's infamous traffic to a standstill. Incidents of vandalism escalated, with notable landmarks like the LAPD headquarters and the U.S. courthouse being targeted. In one of the most striking images of the unrest, self-driving Waymo cars were set ablaze, becoming symbols of a broader rage against what many perceived as an oppressive system. These acts of destruction marked a significant turning point in the demonstrations. The response from law enforcement was swift and forceful. As the protests grew more confrontational, police deployed various less lethal measures to control the crowds. Officers in riot gear used tear gas to disperse groups, the stinging clouds filling the downtown air. The sharp crack of rubber bullets and flashbang grenades became a common sound on the streets, intended to push back the protesters. This heavy-handed approach, while aimed at restoring order, also fueled more anger. Many protesters and civil rights advocates argued that the police response was disproportionate and only served to escalate the conflict, turning a protest into a street battle. In an unprecedented move, President Trump took direct action, deploying active-duty military forces to an American city. Approximately 700 U.S. Marines were sent into Los Angeles, a sight that stunned residents and observers alike. These troops, hailing from the nearby base at 29 Palms, were assigned to protect federal property. Their presence was most visible at the Wilshire Federal Building, where they established a perimeter. While they were equipped for crowd control, officials clarified that the Marines did not possess the power to arrest civilians. Their role was to detain individuals until local or federal law enforcement could arrive, a fine line that raised immediate constitutional concerns. Alongside the active duty troops, the president federalized around 4,000 members of the California National Guard. This move effectively stripped control of the state's guard from Governor Gavin Newsom and placed it directly under White House command. This was a significant escalation, as the National Guard is typically commanded by state governors for domestic emergencies. The Trump administration defended the action as a necessary step to prevent what they termed mob rule. Furthermore, these federalized Guard troops were reportedly being trained to accompany ICE agents on future raids, embedding them directly into the controversial immigration enforcement operations that sparked the protests in the first place. The military presence quickly made itself felt. In a widely reported incident, Marines carried out their first known detention of a civilian near the Wilshire Federal Building. This action, though within their stated mission parameters, sent a chilling message. The sight of uniformed soldiers detaining an American citizen on a city street became a powerful symbol of the federal government's intervention. For supporters of the president, it was a sign that order was being decisively restored. For critics, it was a frightening step towards authoritarianism and a violation of long-standing norms that separate the military from domestic policing. The deployment has been credited by President Trump with restoring calm to the city, but it has created a deeply uneasy peace. The visible presence of armed soldiers and federalized Guard members has changed the dynamic on the streets. While large-scale riots have subsided, the underlying tensions have only intensified. The military's role is not just to quell violence, but to enforce a specific political will over the objections of local leaders. This has created a situation where Los Angeles is not just a site of protest, but a focal point in a national struggle over the limits of presidential power and the rights of citizens to dissent. The federal intervention in Los Angeles immediately ignited a fierce legal and political battle between state and federal authorities. California Governor Gavin Newsom, along with 22 other Democratic governors, quickly filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration. They condemned the federalization of the National Guard without the governor's consent as both illegal and immoral. Newsom labeled the move a brazen abuse of power, arguing that it violated the 10th Amendment, which reserves powers not delegated to the federal government to the states. This lawsuit represented a direct challenge to the president's authority and set the stage for a high-stakes constitutional confrontation in the courts. At the local level, city officials scrambled to manage the escalating crisis. In response to the growing unrest and violence, Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass imposed a strict nighttime curfew. The order covered a 1-square-mile area of downtown LA, requiring residents to stay indoors from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. for several consecutive nights. The mayor indicated that the curfew would likely continue for a few more days as officials worked to regain control. This measure, while aimed at public safety, further restricted the daily lives of residents and became another point of contention for protesters who felt their right to assemble was being suppressed by local and federal forces alike. The legal fight saw a rapid series of developments. Initially, a federal judge sided with Governor Newsom, ruling that President Trump's action was unlawful, and ordered that control of the National Guard be returned to California. However, this victory for the state was short-lived. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals quickly issued a temporary stay on the judge's ruling, restoring federal control of the Guard pending a full hearing. President Trump had already threatened to take the case all the way to the Supreme Court, signaling his determination to see his orders enforced, regardless of opposition from state leaders or lower court rulings. The political fallout extended beyond a simple legal dispute. The conflict became deeply personal. President Trump publicly accused Governor Newsom of losing control of his state, even suggesting he could be arrested for dissipation of duty. Meanwhile, Newsom warned that the federalization of the Guard had left California dangerously understaffed for wildfire season. The political drama peaked when Democratic Senator Alex Padilla interrupted a Homeland Security press conference in LA to challenge the administration's actions. He was forcibly removed and handcuffed, an image that captured the raw and bitter nature of the political divisions fueling the crisis on the ground. The events in Los Angeles did not occur in a vacuum. The anger and frustration that fueled the protests quickly spread to other cities across the United States. From coast to coast, demonstrators took to the streets in solidarity with the protesters in LA and in opposition to the administration's immigration policies and use of military force. Major protests erupted in New York, Chicago, Seattle, San Francisco, and San Antonio. The nationwide scope of the demonstrations illustrated that the issues at play, immigration, civil liberties, and federal overreach, resonated deeply with a significant portion of the American public, turning a local crisis into a national movement. The law enforcement response in other cities mirrored the situation in Los Angeles, leading to a staggering number of arrests. Since the protests began, at least 851 people have been arrested in the LA area alone, facing charges ranging from curfew violations and failure to disperse to more serious offenses like assault, looting, and arson. The numbers climbed nationwide with over 400 arrests in San Antonio, 154 in San Francisco, and dozens more in cities like New York and Spokane. These mass arrests highlight the scale of the civil disobedience and the determination of authorities to enforce order, often through confrontational means. Today, on June 14th, the movement has coalesced into a nationwide day of action. Organizers have planned over 1,900 No Kings rallies across the country to protest what they call President Trump's authoritarian actions. The timing is pointedly symbolic as the rallies coincide with a major military parade in Washington, D.C., celebrating the Army's 250th anniversary. This juxtaposition pits a celebration of military might against a widespread civilian protest against the use of that same might on American soil. It frames the day as a contest over the very definition of American patriotism, and the role of the military in a democracy. As a nation, we are left to confront difficult questions. A recent Reuters Ipsos poll reveals a country split down the middle, with 48% of Americans supporting the use of the military to restore order, while 50% disapprove of the president's handling of the situation. The deployment of troops in Los Angeles has set a powerful precedent. It forces every American to consider where the line is between maintaining law and order and suppressing dissent. The events of the past week are more than just a news story. They are a defining moment that will shape the ongoing debate about the balance of power, the rights of citizens, and the future of the republic.